Greetings from the Strand Theater of Shelbyville. My name is Hillary Smith, and I'm a junior at Shelbyville High School.
I'm Jessica Cassar, and I'm a senior at SHS.
We're both members of our school's wind ensemble. We were honored to be part of a crew who videotaped interviews of several community members who served in our nation's armed forces and now call Shelby County their home.
This project is part of a grant that our school's band department received from the Indiana Arts Commission. It integrates the videotaped interviews with music written especially for our wind ensemble by some of our friends.
Our wind ensemble rehearsed, then recorded these original band pieces for this project. We also recorded some published patriotic arrangements that are used in this undertaking.
The project will also provide an archival history that outlines what life was like in our community and nation at the time these veterans were serving in the military. We realized that we couldn't possibly interview every veteran who has served our country and returned to our community.
We do, however, want to honor everyone who has dedicated a part of their life for service to our country. We hope this project serves as a reminder for us all to stop and think of people who are serving or who have served our country. This undertaking is our way of showing how grateful we are to all who have served, regardless of the time they spent in the military, their branch of service, or the duty they performed.
We chose ordinary people for this project, people whom you might see every day on the street, in the store, or even here at the Strand Theater. The important part of this endeavor is that we honor those who have served. Prior to this project, we went about our lives knowing that silent heroes live among us, but rarely does anyone acknowledge their service.
Now, we are honored to introduce to you a small sample of some of our community's veterans. We hope you'll take some time to pay respect to some of these silent heroes. It's never too late to say thank you and to learn more about those who helped to make our community a special place to live. One of the people we interviewed was Aileen Schlick. Here are some highlights of this interview.
So, can you tell me a little bit about yourself?
Well, I was in the military service right after the Korean War. I did not serve any time during wartime, but I went in the military in 1958, and I had grown up here basically from the time I was 10 years old, and went to St. Joe from the 4th grade through the 8th grade, and then I went down to Shelbyville High School and graduated from there in May of 1955. And from there I went up to Indianapolis and went into nurses training at the old St. Vincent's Hospital, which was on Fall Creek Parkway in Indianapolis. And I took 2 years of a 3-year course and decided that that wasn't really what I wanted to do, so I talked my parents into letting me go in the Navy.
So while you were still at home, did you have any brothers or sisters?
Yes, I have 2 younger brothers, and both of them went into the military out of high school. One of them went in the Navy, and one of them went in the Air Force. And the one that went in the Air Force was in Vietnam for a couple of tours, Vietnam.
What were some of the major headlines in the newspaper?
The country was pursuing their experiments with atomic energy, and there was a lot of talk about communism because, of course, the Iron Curtain was still in effect, and we were still in the Cold War with Russia. It was an entirely different time then.
What was the hot car, the must-have item of the day?
Oh, Mustang and GTO and Corvette.
What would people do for fun or pleasure?
Well, we went to the movies a lot in those days, and we had drive-in movies. And I mean, we had them every night during the summertime. They had first-run movies all the time. And of course, there was dancing. They danced a lot. The kids danced a lot in those days.
What are your most special memories about this community?
Well, growing up here in the 50s was really a very special time. The country was at peace after the Korean War. and times were good. People were making more money, and they had money, they could buy cars, and it just was a really, really fun time. The music was great. I love the music of the 50s. And the kids were good. You know, a lot of them went in the military at that time, and they're just really good kids. It was a good place to live, and a good time to be a teenager. People went on picnics, and they went swimming, and they played ball. Just, you know, not too much different from what it is today, but we just didn't have the drugs that we have now.
What is it about this community that makes you most proud to be from here?
Well, I think the spirit of this town, it's not a big city, and so many of the people know each other, you know, and you have a lot of people that volunteer here, and like right here at the Strand, and it's just a really, really nice community to live in.
What were some of your favorite songs?
Sweet Caroline, the Beatles, any of their music, the big bands, which were still around really in the 50s. They hadn't gone away completely yet. The Dorseys, Glenn Miller, the good music.
Can you briefly describe your time in the military? Like, what was your training? What were some of your major duties? And where did you serve?
I went into the Navy and went from here to Bainbridge, Maryland for boot camp. The Navy, in all of its wisdom, they gave me all their battery of tests, and they discovered that my talents lay in hospital work. So what did they do? They put me in the hospital corps, and I was doing the same thing that I had decided that I didn't really want to do in civilian life. And so I became a hospital corpsman, or Corps Wave as they were called. My basic training, like I said, was in Bainbridge, Maryland, and then from there I went to hospital corps training, which was up at Great Lakes, up above Chicago. And from there I was sent to duty. My first duty was U.S. Naval Hospital, Oakland, California. I worked on hospital wards. Sometimes it would be a surgical ward, sometimes it would be a medical ward. At one time I had complete charge on the night shift of a pediatrics ward.
I see you have a few pictures here. Could you tell us anything about them?
Yes, I'd be glad to. This picture in the single frame is of me in front of my parents' house on South Street in Shelbyville. I had just finished boot camp, and I had come home. It was Easter time in 1958, and that was our dress blue uniform. And as you can see, I have white gloves on, and I have pumps on. That was a real treat, because when we were in boot camp, we couldn't wear heels. We had to wear what we call clodhoppers. But that was a very, very striking uniform, and it drew a lot of attention. No matter where you went, people looked. And this picture is of me later that year, probably around September or October, before my first husband and I married, and that was taken out in California. And this picture is my present husband when he was in the military, and we found out later that we had both gone in the military about the same time. He was on the East Coast and I was on the West Coast. This picture is, I also have on dress blues, but I have on what's called a garrison cap, which is what you wore on base. You didn't wear this fancy, what we called our bucket hat.
We're about to wrap up our interview, but before we do, is there anything you'd like to say or add that we haven't covered?
We've talked about my being in the Navy, but when I came home and I went to work for the Veterans Administration, and while I was learning my job there, I was approached and asked if I wanted to join the Army Reserves. So I did, and spent quite a few years in the Army Reserves after I was in the Navy. So I'm actually a veteran of the Navy and the Army Reserves.
Mr. Schlick, our community salutes you for your service.
Thank you very much.